Yeah, and now Nakamura's about to go under 1 minute, and all of his retreats over the last 3 moves have inspired Magnus to push forward. Magnus is moving in for the kill. He thinks that this is the moment to strike, and this pawn move has maximized the tension. He's trying to open up the diagonal for White's dark squared bishop. Look at that white dark squared bishop. It's been asleep for most of the game, but it's about to come to life, and it might come to life decisively. I think Hikaru Nakamura's position is just on the brink here. He's going to go down to defeat because...
Right, because after knight takes pawn, it looks great, but the rook takes knight, and suddenly that bishop has awoken and will swap itself off for the rook. And just take a look at Black's king. Has no pawn shelter whatsoever. I mean, that king side is just shattered. And so many pawns to choose from. I mean, which one would you take?
I would just take that pawn in my camp, in my half there. That black pawn
with the queen or the
square.
rook?
Both.
Exactly, both look good.
Probably I would take with the rook, but there's an argument to be made for both. So right now, White is temporarily 1 pawn down, but he has a choice of 2 different pawns to recapture. And once Magnus does take back one of his pawns, just compare, firstly, king safety, but secondarily, the white knight versus the black bishop. White's knight is just, it's just superb. And Black's bishop not really doing too much, hitting thin air.
And look at that. Jan-Christoph Duda sitting behind Magnus. A draw in his first game against Maxim Vachier, so he has been able to save it then. Jan-Christoph Duda. It didn't look too good for him on the bar, and also a win for Vladislav Artemiev with the black pieces against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. And also the bar likes the situation for Rajapov with the black pieces against Aronian. But in this one, it's the one with the white pieces that you think will actually win the game.
Most likely. Magnus is in the driver's seat. There's still a lot of work to be done, but right now, too many weaknesses in the black camp. And okay, Magnus, I'm surprised by that decision. He swapped off the queens, but he is winning a pawn in the process. So now Magnus, rather than being a pawn down, is a pawn up. But Nakamura at least has activated his king. And suddenly the margin for error has maybe lessened slightly for Magnus. Now, if the knight trades itself off for the black bishop, then yes, it's a pure rook endgame, but remember, rook endgames have a drawish tendency. So Nakamura, I think, as well, due to his love of endgames, especially in rapid and blitz chess, he will be very relieved at that decision from Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah, I mean, especially it goes against the advice that we've been giving throughout the tour, which is like, don't swap off queens if your opponent's king is vulnerable. And when we were playing double chess again against Anish Giri and a strong women's international master, Adelin, we were quoting everything back, and it was all our phrases back at those two, and we did quite well.
Yeah, we did very well.
Yeah.
And I think Magnus, yes, he's still in control because White has an extra pawn for no real compensation, but if he isn't able to deliver the knockout, if he isn't able to finish things off over the next 5-10 moves, he will start to regret taking the queens off. Look, however, at what Magnus has done. This is why he's such an endgame maestro. The white king has gone on a journey towards the center, and it's also cleared a square for White's rook to start checking the black king.
And the black king will then go to the edge of the board, and then suddenly that black king is just cornered there. And you, in endgame, just remember this. Teamwork makes the dream work. And if you get that so that all your pieces are in operational, on active squares, you will always have good chances to hold the game.
And Hikaru, he plays the move he needed to play, essentially. He's pushed a pawn, stopping White's rook from delivering a really nasty check. So Nakamura, he's not known for his poker face as well, shaking his head there. He's unhappy with his position, as he should be. It is difficult, but he's still fighting, he's still kicking, and he's alive. And Magnus, we see his screen. What move is he going to play? I suspect he's about to move the white rook right now, but where? Which direction? White's knight looks perfect, White's king looks perfect. How do you keep improving?
To the middle. You put the rook in the middle on an open line.
Support the white knight?
Yes.
Yeah, that looks very sensible. And what else could you consider? You could consider maybe pushing a white pawn, challenging the black pawn that's just moved, but I don't know why. Okay, he does push that pawn 2 squares forward. So he's saying to black, you can take me en passant, you can take that white pawn as if it just moved 1 square with the black pawn. A bit of a special rule, but that allows White's rook to recapture with a check. So Magnus just trying to get a grip on the position, trying to tempt Hikaru into taking this pawn, which he most likely won't.
No, you do not want to capture that pawn because one thing we've highlighted that, you know, as soon as the rook gives check to the black king, the black... Oh,
okay, he does.
He does.
Maybe he thought there was nothing else to do.
Okay, I stand corrected, and now the king now is just lumbered in the corner, stuck on the edge of the board. Okay.
Now black's rook trying to hit the white knight. That white knight can move, or white can step a pawn forward in the middle to defend it. There we go.
That's very natural, actually, because it kind of then allows the white king to mobilize and get in on the action. The white king is just going to make a beeline for those pawns on the left side of the board.
Yeah, black's king is just cut off. The black king is not going to participate in the rest of the battle, and white still has an extra pawn. This one is almost hopeless now for Hikaru Nakamura, and you can see that on his face. He's not happy at all. Magnus, meanwhile, looking focused, looking calm. Looking like a different Magnus from yesterday, where he did struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting, actually, how he was willing to get himself into a shaky opening. Okay, so we have a few moves. The bishop's been driven backwards, and Magnus just establishing a grip with his pieces. I mean, but it was just a quote that he said a few months ago after the Crypto Cup, that every time Hikaru sensed that he was winning, he got nervous, and he slipped up.
Yeah, Hikaru against Magnus, there is just this mental barrier. Well, we know his famous record against Magnus over the board. I think he lost 12 or 13 games in a row without winning a game. Okay, there were some draws in between, but Magnus was winning 12-0 in their head-to-head scores at some point, and it took a long, long time for Hikaru to strike against Magnus over the board. And also online, in the big clashes, Magnus so far has quite a decisive lead. So, okay, white's knight now perfectly centralized. White has put his pawns on light squares on this left side, so they are slightly vulnerable to black's bishop, but
you know what I'm going to say next?
Arabian checkmate.
There will be something called an Arabian checkmate in the air if the black bishop gets caught on the wrong diagonal. So if it goes on like pawn hunting and actually grabs that pawn that's sitting on the B line, then the knight will, okay, you're going to see it here. If that bishop moves, that's it. The rook will lift up to the top of the board and deliver a check, which will be checkmate to the black king.
Okay, and wow, Magnus actually doesn't go for any checkmating ideas.
He's banking it. I mean, he's just saying, your king is just awful. It's just lumbered there in no man's land. All I need to do is just walk my king very casually. It doesn't even need to run to the left side of the board. The rook will come and gather up some pawns. Game over.
Yeah, so white's king has his eye on those pawns. And yeah, Magnus actually gave up his extra pawn in the process as well. So it does look like it's just 3 pawns versus 3 pawns. It's a rook endgame, notoriously drawish, but it's just the difference of kings. That's why we go on and on about king activity in endgame. King activity is everything. Essentially, white's going to be playing with an extra piece, the king.
And here it comes.
Yeah, after this knight is recaptured, white's king is headed straight for those black pawns, and a rook alone cannot defend them. White can add his rook to the attack later. So, okay, Hikaru trying to bring his rook across.
Here it goes. The king is in, and I guess the only move that Hikaru can play is just to step back. The rook, give a check, and now the king will tuck itself away in the corner of the board.
Yeah, so white's king will just maybe step back, keep an eye on those black pawns, and then while black's king is still cut off, still unable to cross the barrier that this white rook has created, then white's rook will shift and go after black's pawn in the corner. Okay, Hikaru just waiting with the black rook. Magnus now, I'm surprised the evaluation bar says only +1 point something. It feels like it's
This feels like it's like in the bag.
Yeah.
Magnus has banked it. Just using Monopoly terms there.
Yeah. And he needs to... I was trying to make some property puns with Monopoly, but not coming to me. But yeah, Magnus...
Which property is the most expensive in the English Monopoly?
It's Park Lane.
Park Lane.
Yeah. A very high-end part of London. But white's rook now shifting, so white's rook is no longer cutting off the black king. The black king can start racing across, but look how far away it is from where the action's really happening.
Oh, shaking his head.
Okay, Magnus shaking his head. Has he miscalculated something? I mean, I'm surprised he let the king out this quickly. I don't think he needed to rush with this rook move, but now he must just be trying to work out what happens if the white rook comes up to the top of the board, then swings across to the left and takes some pawns. Maybe black's king is coming towards the white pawns in time. So a bit of counting is needed, a bit of calculation. He needs still to be careful. Hikaru still fighting This is why he's so strong. One of the best blitz and rapid players in the world, Hikaru. He just never gives up. So tenacious. Okay, white's rook. Can it go to the top of the board? That's the most obvious move right now.
It looks like the most obvious move. I don't see the problem.
There we go.
The rook goes up. I mean, the king, it takes too many moves for the king to chase away those pawns. So must be something to do with this move, mobilizing the rook.
Yeah, so white's rook can start going after the black pawns right now, but black's rook is going after white's pawns. And especially that white pawn that is undefended on the b3 square, the white pawn that keeps everything else covered. So Magnus, okay, he's winning, but he has to be very careful still. Accuracy is everything in endgames. No matter how amazing your position is, no matter how many pawns up you are, no matter how active your king is compared to your opponent's king, you have to stay focused, you have to calculate very correctly.
Yes, you can't celebrate until the game is won.
Yeah.
That's something I was always taught when I was a kid.
Okay, Magnus raising his eyebrows, maybe realizing it's not as simple as he thought, but okay, the next move at least should be quite straightforward. The white rook can go to the corner now, the top left corner of the board, and start munching on the black pawns. I think you'll end up a couple of pawns ahead if you're accurate.
I mean, is it also, I mean, if you don't want to calculate that much, I mean, could you be looking at also just pushing your pawn forward?
Your A pawn?
Your A pawn, undermine, because after all, there are some positions that you know are totally winning and they can act as signposts and guide you to the victory. So for instance, I'm just thinking ahead, I'm just thinking to something that we talked about in an earlier show, like the Lucina position. That's like 100% winning.
Yeah, but I would be very worried that if white's pawn steps forward, black will just take that pawn, and the more pawns disappear, the further you are from victory. It's definitely on the radar. It's on Magnus's kind of list of candidate moves. There are only really two logical moves here for white, either to bring that white rook to the left corner or to push his pawn, but either way, he needs to be careful. Okay, he brings his rook across.
Oh, so he has a crafty idea up his sleeve. So if the rook comes down to attack the pawn, then he wants to switch to my move, which is to push the pawn forward.
I think that last move clinches it actually for Magnus, a really, really sophisticated move.
This is one to put in the mind palace and store it.
Yeah, so black's rook now going after the white pawns. And, okay, Magnus, how is he going to finish off this game? He's about to play king takes pawn.
King takes pawn.
We see it on his screen as well. And now this last pawn push, making use of a pin. Black's pawn there on the b6 square cannot go and capture white's pawn after this attack because the black rook would fall prey to the white rook. And really nice touch. He's going to ensure that Magnus is going to make a new queen with his pawn very shortly. Okay, Hikaru's last chance is to go after white's remaining pawn. And, okay, this guy's racing up the board. Anna, the A pawn, she's about to win the game.
But wait 1 second. I mean, is there any hope for black in like giving up his rook for that far advanced pawn and then grabbing the pawn? We'll see. We'll see. It might be a race.
Yeah. So black's only hope is to give up his rook for that far advanced white pawn at some point, but he needs to pick off white's remaining pawn and he needs to get his own black pawns running. So that's a lot of ifs. That's that requires everything to fall into place at the right time for Nakamura, but he's got a glimmer of hope, potentially.
Oh, by the way, we were told that the most expensive property is Mayfair.
Oh, Mayfair.
Not Park Lane.
Well,
it's a purple one, anyway.
I worked in Mayfair for a few years. I should have known that. But,
ooh.
Yeah, it's too expensive there. Can barely afford a McDonald's, let alone anything else in Mayfair. And, okay, the black king coming across towards the white pawns. And, okay, Magnus captures a pawn and the white king sidesteps. He's only 2 squares away from promoting to a new queen.
Wow.
Okay, but the evaluation bar doesn't necessarily approve of that. Will it correct itself? Nakamura thinks it's hopeless. I think it's game over as well. I can't see the black pawn being quite quick enough. This type of position, this is where you really need to put it on a board and study it at home and do a bit of counting. You can do it in your head. It's a very linear path as well. It's I go here, he goes there, I go here, he goes there. There's no branches. It's forced moves only.
And there's one significant thing. Take a look at white's rook. White's rook is in the ideal spot to block any checks, and also if the pawn steps up to the 7th row, it is in the perfect situation to create a shield for that pawn. And so this means that the trade will happen much sooner. The trade for the rook and against pawn will happen much sooner than Nakamura would like.
And there, Magnus, he thinks he knows he's winning, but he just put in his head in his hands to calculate. And this is what Jovanka means. The white rook wants to slide across next move. White doesn't actually want to make a queen on the next turn. White's rook is going to slide across and block the black rook from sacrificing itself. So it has to sacrifice itself immediately. And here we see the race.
Yes.
Is that black pawn quick enough? Nakamura on his camera thinks not. The white rook is going to stop that pawn. There we go. And now the white king is going to sprint back towards that black pawn. Nakamura resigns. His pawn wouldn't have been in time anyway, and Magnus takes the win.
It's a win. First game for Magnus Carlsen against Hikaru Nakamura. Great start to the day for Magnus Carlsen. What a great win as well. It took 50 minutes, but it's just like a classical Magnus kind of win, you know, the pawns just racing up there.
Yeah, that's why he loves to push his pawns early in the middle game, because he knows if it comes down to an endgame, it's always going to be a race, and it's always about one move here, one move there, and he has such great endgame technique. Also,